Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down with leaders of today to help inspire and create more leaders for tomorrow. Because I believe that the world needs more leaders. Here in episode 15, I sat down to chat with my friend Brent Beshore, who's the CEO and founder of Permanent Equity. Brent is born and raised in Missouri and started Permanent Equity. They buy family business, multi-generational companies and help grow and scale them for their investors. It was a fascinating conversation. We talked about how to spot and identify leaders within organizations so we can hand off the baton to that next generation of leaders. He had some great advice to share about being a parent, and actually he said he doesn't really consider himself much of a leader. So it was interesting getting his perspective. I really think you're going to enjoy the conversation here with Brent. So let's take a listen. All right, welcome to the Leadmore podcast. My friend Brent, how you doing today, sir?
Good, John. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, so I met you, I'm trying to think, I think it might have been about Big Omaha 2010, maybe 10 years ago or so. And I actually think back to that particular conference where like so many little nodes of people I've met in my network started at Big Omaha. What were you doing at that time? Tell me, because I remember things have changed a little bit.
Yeah. I'm certainly like the Forrest Gump of private equity. Let's see, back in 2010, so we had just acquired the first company, and own that company today called Media Cross. We were kind of experimenting with a dual model of engaging in startup activity, as well as doing acquisitions. And I think that, as many things in my career have demonstrated, you've got these ideas about how the world works, and then you've got actually how the world really works. And it's almost impossible to be good at something, even if you're trying to be excellent at something, if you're not really focused on it. And so, what we figured out was that there are some similarities between the early stage, sort of startup world and more of the small business operations world. But there's a lot of differences and a lot of nuance of the feel of the differences in investment and hiring, and things are just really different. And so we chose, intentionally, we'd been successful in the startup world and, made a couple good investments in that world, as well as started some companies ourselves, and incubated those, and those did well.
I remember there was like an incubator model. I remember that.
Yeah. We had bought a beautiful 16,000 square foot glass, steel, and concrete building here in town, and really started doing a lot of a sort of incubator model here. And again, it's something I think we could have been successful at it. I mean, there's a couple YC companies that came out of the area. We were instrumental in bringing Startup Weekend here to town. And so really got steeped into that culture and into a lot of the relationships. And so, came to Big Omaha, and Jeff and those guys, I thought did a really great job. And I would agree that there's a lot of great people at that event. I mean, we've definitely moved over the last 10 years, really exclusively towards late stage family-owned companies, helping them transition. Yep. And so the name of the firm's Permanent Equity. Nothing's permanent, right? So it's a little bit of a misnomer. But we have I think the longest dated fund in private equity history. So we have a guarantee of 27 years. And then we have an option to renew at year 25 for another 25 years. So, 50-ish years, it's functionally permanent. It allows us the optionality to get involved with these companies and treat them very similarly to how the family treated them, over generations. There's 12 of us here in Columbia, Missouri. We just finished raising a new fund. And so we've got plenty of capital and, looking for good opportunities to get involved long-term with these family-owned businesses.
Well, I want to get into some of those leaders in the family/small category, but I also want to talk about your leadership journey. So we won't do the full life story, but tell me a little bit about, how you came to be and what life experiences led to eventually forming what was Adventures and then, now Permanent Equity.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I grew up in Joplin, Missouri, and then went to school on the East Coast, came back to get my law degree and my MBA at Mizzou. I had no idea.
So what did you think at that point? Okay. You didn't know. Yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, honestly, I had no idea. I was good at school, but I didn't enjoy it. And I think part of it is, I had this lifelong battle of just prideful arrogance. And, I think that I would have, if I could go back and do the MBA in law program again, I think I'd get a lot more out of it. I was just so tired of sitting in a classroom talking about theory, and wanted to go out and just sort of make contact with the world and do something. And so, anyway, I dropped out of those programs, started a business very unsuccessfully. First time founders, like I have so much empathy for people now. When I was a complete train wreck at 23, 24. In terms of, I had no idea, spend money on the wrong things, focus on the wrong things. Just the way that we went about it, it's just, everything's off and, uncalibrated. And so, a lot of that informed, a lot of the things that we've done well now or doing better now are just the result of hitting our face on the pavement. To be completely honest, I think, making survivable mistakes is probably a pretty good lesson, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And so just making sure that you're always aware of your downside risk, personally, professionally, monetarily, relationally, it's important. I look back on those, I'd say first 5 years in business, and it was a messy blur. I had a lot of growing up to do and a lot of learning to do.
Brent, why don't you give us an example of a portfolio company that kind of that you met? Tell us where they were when you found them, where they are now. That just helps the listeners explain what permanent equity does when they work with a company, buy in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got involved with a company named called TEPCO. It's a glass and glazing business based in Dallas, Texas, offices in Oklahoma City and Las Vegas. And just a great group of guys. They build glass panels for skyscrapers, as well as vertical lift glass product for the stadium market. So, specialized business. It's a fascinating business. But when we first looked at the business, we asked the leadership team, so what's holding back growth? And the CEO and predominant seller, he said, I'm just very risk averse. I've seen a lot of companies get big, then get a lot smaller. It's destroyed the culture. And I really just don't, I have a disincentive, I guess he would say, towards high growth. And I also asked, what else is holding you back? And they said, well, frankly, our branding and marketing, it may not seem like a big thing in the, in that world. The subcontractor world is a lot of relationships, but they said all the guys who are bidding out from these GCs, the work to subcontractors, are going to the website, and our website's terrible. I said, yeah, your website's pretty bad.
Or maybe on their phone, or they're probably no mobile site.
Yeah, for sure. And so, we asked them about, are their financial capacity holding back? Yeah, we have a small line of credit. We've never really drawn on it. And this is something common in the construction world is, it's almost considered a failure to have to use a line of credit. But if you look at that business, the way the receivables work, the way that billing works and everything, a growing construction business should take on the need for a line of credit, and a pretty large one if you're growing rapidly. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, you kind of look at all those factors, and post-close, we were able to get them a new website up very, very quickly. They'd been trying to get a new website up for years and just couldn't get the right mix and approvals and all that. And then, we were able to get them a much larger line of credit. We helped their bonding capacity with sort of national bonding program. They were with kind of a local group before. And, the result of those three things is the company doubled in size within a short period of time. Wow. So, there's a lot of these things. Look, it's always harder. I'm trying to summarize a lot of work and a lot of hard work and some risks that we took into a short compressed time period. It's very hard, right? So it's not easy. It's like, oh, you just buy a business and then put up a new website and everything doubles, or put up a line of credit, right? So I don't want to give that impression to the listeners, but that's a good example.
When you talk about when you talk about that work that was done, that's done by your team of 12. Most of these type of things to really optimize, and or do you go out and get other partners, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that we think about what resources we want to have at the permanent equity level versus located within the companies is, if it's higher impact, lower frequency, we want to have that located at the permanent equity level. So how often are you renegotiating bonding programs or lines of credit? That's a very, very important but expensive expertise. And so we wouldn't have individual company that would want to pay for that expertise on staff, but we can house it at the permanent equity level and inject that in, infrequently, as well as build up sort of a network effect of relationships and knowledge of how to do those things well. And so, yeah, those are the things that we get involved in. Another example would be, if we're going to kind of completely gut the marketing advertising systems of a company, that's not an expertise that you want to have on staff, right? To design, completely break everything apart, redesign a program from the ground up. That's really specialized and expensive, very, very high specialization work. Now, running the program once it's in place is definitely should be at the company level. So like, we're not going to run the marketing program. We're going to help you design, redo the sales systems, get better bonding, get better, banking relationships, lower your cost of capital, improve your sort of marketing or your accounting systems, things like that are going to be, sort of long-term structural changes. We want to house that at the permanent equity level and certainly collaborate, no doubt. I mean, we're not coming in and just sort of clear cutting what's there.
Yeah.
And we're doing it slowly over time. I mean, some of those things, whether your line of credit is $1 million or $15 million doesn't make any difference operationally, right? So it's not like we're harming anybody by increasing the line of credit. So those things we're going to do much more quickly than things that we would be saying, hey, we really think we need to reorg this division, or we really think that we need to bring on a bunch more people in this area. Those are things that are going to wait, a year, 2 years to really implement and talk about for a long time.
That makes sense. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, you're a great leader yourself. You're an awesome follow on Twitter. You're always sharing a lot of your thoughts and ideas. You have your team of 12 that you lead, but you also, how portfolio-wise now, you see and interact with tons of leaders and very different of all sorts of varieties. It's the grandpa who's, his grandpa started the business and
Sure.
multiple generations later. So I want to dig into how you think about leadership as you've seen so many different ways to do it, because that's kind of part of the thesis of the show, is that there are so many different ways. So you meet a founder of one of these companies. What are you trying to learn about them as a CEO, as a leader, and how do you kind of dig into their tendencies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think maybe the first place to start is that there are a few, but only a few sort of non-negotiables that we won't partner with somebody on when it comes to leadership. There are a lot of different ways, and I think that John, you said it perfectly. There's different styles that work for different companies, and remember, employees are opting into that system, right? If they're working there and they've been there, especially for a long time, it's not because they don't understand what the leadership style is, and the style may be vastly different. I mean, we've seen companies that are very decentralized, sort of, very empowering to the employee level. And you're going to get a different type of employee that is attracted to that than somebody who's very command and control. And, we have a tendency of saying command and control is wrong and decentralized is right. And I think, look, for the most part, it's better for the people and encourages more growth to be in a decentralized system than a centralized system. With that said, there are also people who opt into that centralized system and say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to be told. I want to fit into the systems that you've created because they're so powerful. They work, right? I mean, and these are differences that maybe, even amongst tech companies. I mean, Apple was notorious for being command and control, right?
Yep.
There was a certain design aesthetic that they liked. It was right in the sense that customers bought it. Can you imagine if you were a designer coming in and being like, well, I have all these ideas that I want to take in a completely different direction? That's not going to work, right? Versus other areas where, hey, there's other companies out there that very much want that bottoms up, bubble up type of difference. So what I would say is that outside of, we want high integrity. We won't tolerate shenanigans. Let's just call it that. Look, all of us are messy. All of us make mistakes. So I'm not saying mistakes. That's not what I'm talking about at all.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that there isn't bad behavior that we tolerate, because of course I had bad behavior this morning and yesterday and the day before. Right. So, and so does everyone else. I think there's a line though of, disrespectful, harmful, and consistently so that we don't like to engage in. And so oftentimes when we're meeting people, what we're really trying to figure out is, the philosophy is the leadership style is what it is. It's working or you wouldn't be successful. So we're going to default to working. We want to understand where is the perception that they have of themselves and the company, and where does that differ from the reality? So we always just try to triangulate and ping a lot of things around them, and try to ask them the same types of questions over and over and over again over weeks and months, and in a lot of different settings, when they're relaxed, when they're stressed, to see kind of how they react. And I mean, the joke being that, you find out who you really are when you're interrupted, right? Or when you're irritated. Those are types of things that, just naturally over time, there's going to be frictions that develop, right? There's no relationship that's friction free. So we just like to see the consistency of how those people react in different situations. And then, as a sort of a window into what it will be like to work with us. It's the process of acquisition is very much like the dating process, right? Versus marriage. Usually you put your best foot forward, usually. So you always got to assume that behavior is going to get worse, that the warts and the ugly side is going to come out, typically after the marriage, but you can kind of see hints of where that might be. I think that, where we maybe had failures in the past of evaluating that is when the behavior is so different on the surface than it is underneath. And there's a lot of mismatch between those two things that we just weren't able to uncover for one reason or another.
Yeah. And so then sometimes a phase 2 for permanent equity is the founder or CEO is actually looking to be done, looking to get out. Yeah. And so now you own this company that doesn't have a leader. So talk about that. Are you usually looking in-house? Are you thinking, if we can go get this type of person outside and bring them in, how do you profile that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we would probably prefer to have leadership elevated from within. They that know kind of the essence of the business, have the institutional memory. There are cases where that's there, but there's no one who's going to really fit the CEO role. And look, a lot of people, there's titles of CEO, and then there's real CEOs. And we can talk about the different types of CEOs. But what oftentimes is called a CEO in a small business is really just a general manager. And I say just a general manager. It's a hell of a hard job, incredible skills required. That's not to demean that job at all. But a CEO is going to have be sort of working on the business, not in the business most of the time. They're going to be thoughtful about how to combine the finances and the technology and the operations of the company along with sales and marketing teams, how it all kind of combines together. They're going to be thoughtful about M&A and maybe how we grow the company by geography. So it's gonna be a lot more of visioning type work and a lot more true leadership, as opposed to okay, hey, we have a customer that's pissed off and we got to go put that fire out. That's just a different. And oftentimes, by the way, CEOs of small business have to do both, which is what makes it outrageously difficult. But I would say in the cases where we really need specialized skill sets that aren't present, of course, we're going to bring in somebody from the outside, whether that's CEO, CFO, whatever it is in the leadership team. But prefer to help bring somebody up in the organization and then help them sort of grow and learn.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to throw at you and see how you react to. I have an attorney friend here in Sioux Falls who said, I think he works with a lot of family multi-generational businesses, and he said there is just a tremendous opportunity. He feels like in Sioux Falls, if somebody wants to be being an entrepreneur is kind of the sexy thing now, the last decade or so. Everyone wants to start a business, come up with a new idea. And he's like, there's going to be this massive opportunity in Sioux Falls of all these baby boomers who are going to retire or looking to hand off or sell their company that are going to need leaders. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this was a thesis for permanent equity. So in 2010, after we acquired MediaCross, it really opened our eyes to this whole generation of people. Baby boomers are the largest owners of profitable small companies, and the next 10 years will be the largest intergenerational transfer of private businesses in the history of the world. So there's no doubt that there's far more sellers than there are going to be buyers, or qualified buyers, I should say. Look, there's always going to be somebody running around out there. If you don't care, sort of who buys your business, you don't care what they do with it. There's going to be somebody out there.
Someone's got a checkbook.
We'll write you a check. Exactly right. There's the specialization of getting into, especially the lower end of the market. Maybe we could talk for a second about kind of the market dynamics. When I say the lower end versus the upper end, kind of what that means.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's do it. I was going to, because I kind of wanted to transition to your book next, which I think this is some of that related part. Sure. So go ahead, talk about this messy market.
Yeah. So the book, The Messy Marketplace. So we, yeah, we wrote the book. It's basically the first 5 to 7 hours of conversation we wanted to have with any seller or leadership team. But in that book, we talk about, that when we talk about the lower middle market, which is kind of the segment that we're in, or the small business market, SMB space, those are kind of, they blend together at the lower end. So the lower middle market is kind of anything under $20 million of earnings a year. So these are big companies. When we think of small businesses, these are hundreds and hundreds of employees, if not thousands of employees, on the upper end. And then on the lower end, you're kind of you kind of get into more small business world, less into the lower middle market when you kind of below $2 million in earnings, right? So there's kind of this blend between sort of $500,000 of earnings and $2 million. That's kind of lower end of the market, higher end of the small business market. Those two worlds are fairly different. If you're buying a true small business, you're buying a job, right? I mean, you're hopefully you're paying for a higher priced job. As you get into the lower middle market and the more the private equity space, you're buying scalable companies. So those are kind of the differences. And I mean, you can transition. There's a tremendous amount of wealth creation and transitioning something from a small business into a sort of viable private equity lower middle market business. I mean, there's a big jump in valuations there, big jump in capabilities, big jump in growth capabilities as well. So, but I would say those are kind of the segments. We typically like to play kind of right above small business and sort of on the very low end. So kind of starting around $3 million of earnings and then go up to about 8 to 10. I mean, we will go up to 15, 18 in earnings. For very select opportunities, but we really like that 3 to 8 space because the companies are successful. I mean, no one would say a business that earns $3 million a year and is closely held by a family wouldn't be successful.
Absolutely.
These are the chairmen of the country club, the leaders of nonprofit boards. I mean, these are the sort of local icons that typically run these companies, and they're doing really well. So there's a lot of opportunity to take something that's already been successful and then just really help it grow sustainably up and add those talents and techniques that maybe wouldn't be as pervasive in that segment, but would be much larger companies.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so I know I kind of threw you off a little bit of your direction, but with the book, I think listeners should, I loved the book. I thought it was a great read. Messy Marketplace. It's perfect because I read it on like one flight. So it's like nice. You guys boiled it down to the essence of what you really need to know. And it was fascinating to me as a business owner because you're thinking, well, someday I may need to sell this business, or as an entrepreneur who may want to buy a business, and so I think anybody can find some value in that book. Tell me why. Maybe this is going toward thought leadership. Maybe this is like a lead magnet for your business. What was the premise of like why we want to do the book and why you want to get these thoughts out there?
Yeah, well, so it's a little bit different than both of those, and I actually, the idea of going out and sort of being an influencer and all that stuff. Like I went through that phase of my life. I'm kind of done with that side of things. Honestly, I think the thing that really works well is just scale conversations. So content, writing, video, audio, things like this, the only way to scale a conversation. So, I'm able to have this conversation with you. Somebody's able to listen to it, in essence, participate in the conversation. That's the same thing with the book, is the first 5 to 7 hours of conversation that we wanted to have with any seller leadership team. And we kept having these same conversations over and over and over again. And what we figured out was, why don't we just write them down and then we can just share them with people? And that's what's really been valuable. I mean, a seller yesterday that we were on the phone with said, they initially thought about going with an auction process. They read the book. They said, look, I think that you all are a great fit. They are a good fit for us. And so it really helped spark a conversation that wouldn't have happened otherwise. He said, hey, it walked me through a lot of the things that I was feeling, but I couldn't articulate. So we tried to, in the book, not only talk about the really nuts and bolts and nitty gritty of deals, but we try to talk about the softer side and the emotional side of the deals, which is something that I think for the most part gets kind of sort of left to the side and not talked about, which is really unhelpful. I mean, we're human beings. We're going to be emotional. We're going to have different competing interests. There's opportunity cost to everything. And so, you can't look at it as a monolith and say every seller sells because just the money. Certainly the money is part of it, no doubt. You want to be properly compensated for the work you put in. But at the same time, it's a lot beyond that. Why you sell matters, how you sell matters, to whom you sell should matter, if you care about what you built. So those are all the things that we try to get into in the book and talk through.
Yeah, you had that, was it 7 reasons typically why someone would sell? And I remember reading it. And one of them, I think, is like, I want to wake up and just think about something else. And that one hit me like a ton of bricks, as like an entrepreneur. I'm like, yeah, some days I do want to wake up and think about something else. So, well, I want to ask you one more, and then we'll do some rapid fire. If somebody is, because I think this concept of this kind of wealth transfer, this opportunity for future leaders to emerge, I think one of my ideas with Leadmore is that we need to pass the baton, and there are leaders who are ready to step up and take it, but we have the other leaders who have to be willing to pass it. And so if someone is that aspiring leader, wants to become, it doesn't have to be the CEO title, it could be a leader in a company, a general manager. What would you say to someone listening? How do you groom or get ready for a leadership opportunity in a business like Permanent works with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would say get experience by doing it. I mean, it's really hard. You can't read books on how to lead small companies. A lot of it, I mean, as I talked about early on, I mean, any wisdom that we had is because we failed at that thing and learned, probably shouldn't do that. And I think there's just a certain cadence, and the things that an inexperienced leader, certainly that I experienced, was that the things that I thought were important weren't, and the things that I didn't think were important were, and you're like I said, you're uncalibrated. So I would say, the best prep is to work in a smaller company, do a lot of different jobs, look around you and see what you like about the leaders that you're working with, and what you don't like, and help that influence. Okay, if I was in that position, what would I do, and how would I do it differently? What I would say is have some humility in knowing that there's a lot of stuff that, depending on where you are in the organization, there may be decisions that are being made that look stupid to you, that are excellent and absolutely the right decision. And so have some humility and say, look, I'm going to assume that the business is being run well, and I'm going to assume that the things are being done until I know that it's not, because that'll put you in a way better position than assuming everyone's an idiot but you, everyone knows how to do nothing but you. And oftentimes we'll see that in middle tier employees that are trying to step up into major leadership roles. They have this sort of, cynicism that they just never fully appreciate, like how complex and difficult it is to truly operate these companies. And they get into this weird spin cycle of cynicism that leads to doubt. And there's always this friction that's not healthy. I mean, there's, nothing is more annoying to a leader than to have somebody come to them and say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's a problem over there. Yeah. There's a problem. You should fix that. It's like, well, yeah, no kidding. There's problems everywhere, right? What's helpful is when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I noticed this problem. Do you agree it's a problem? Yes, absolutely. Okay, it's a problem. Here's how I'm thinking about solving it. Do you mind if I go solve that? Right? Yes. Like that is just amazing. And I would say how you grow in organizations up into, lower tier leadership, up into being CEO, is you just start working yourself out of a job. You keep solving problems.
That's good.
I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, you're so right that a leader wants someone to recognize it and do it, right? Don't wait to be asked. They just go fix it, or they solve it, or they get permission and then go do it, or whatever. So now I want to do a few rapid fire here at the end, just to kind of understand you as a person and as a leader and what makes you tick. So I'm not sure if you wrote a book. I don't know if you're a big reader. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I'm reading a book on, health. It's insulin and how insulin affects our body mass. I'd gotten into, contrary to how I look, I'd gotten into fitness probably 7 or 8 years ago, and done a lot of work, in trying to understand, sort of, is it low fat, is it low carb, is it low calorie, all that stuff, and how much does fasting interact. But anyway, I recently picked up a new book on the topic. It's the first one I've read in probably 5 years, and I'm trying to get back into competitive tennis, and I'm about 30 pounds too heavy to really do that well, or at least for very long. So I need to get back at it and drop some weight.
Is that something you did growing up, playing tennis?
I didn't. I was in basketball until I realized that maybe my genetics were not predisposed to a basketball career. And then I switched into tennis, and I really enjoyed it. So trying to get back into playing tournaments and back into that space. The other book I'm reading right now is called Glittering Vices, which is a fantastic book. I'm about halfway through. It goes through the sort of 7 deadly sins of vices, but in a way that is deeply intellectual and thoughtful. I just got done with the sections on lust and gluttony. unbelievable articulations of things that I've never heard articulated any other way. So those would be two. I mean, you can put them in the show notes. I'd be happy to send you the links to them. And
for sure.
I can't vouch for the book that I've just started reading, but seven sure. Glittering Vices has been great. So
2020 has been an abnormal year, to put it lightly, a little bit chaotic. What do you do to unplug, to de-stress? How do you separate yourself when you just come home and you need to take a break?
Yeah, I got into long walks early in COVID. I mean, when you're locked down, I mean, I want to get out and go. And so I would put on my podcasts or sermons or have phone calls, and I would walk like just until I was done. And sometimes that'd be 8 or 9 miles and just go. And so that's been great. I really look forward to that. Right now I am playing quite a bit of tennis, which has been another really nice, great exercise. I'm sore in all kinds of ways that I haven't been in a really long time. I'm waiting for that to go away, hopefully here soon. But yeah, other than that, spending time with family. I mean, I've got three young girls, and it's hard, but it's awesome. Love spending time with them, and trying to think what else. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, grilling, listening to Garth Brooks. I don't know, whatever.
I knew you were a father of girls like myself. I have 2. So that was a perfect segue. What is a piece, I think parents are tremendous leaders themselves. What's a piece of parenting advice you would give to anyone listening?
Oh my goodness. Just have humility and patience, because every time you think you've got it all figured out, John, you and I were talking prior to starting recording about difficult nights. Just when you think they're sleeping through the night, just when you think that everything's fine, that you've got this parenting thing figured out. Kids have an uncanny ability to throw you for a loop. And so it's been great. I mean, I think that having just the patience to understand that however good things seem, there's some changes on the horizon, and just know it and anticipate it and roll with it, and it keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some of your your path toward permanent equity. Some of the things that you maybe stumbled and you said hit your face on. We asked this question at Lemonly. What's your superpower? What's the one thing you do better than anyone else? Makes you brag about yourself.
Superpower. Yeah, it's funny you say this, because I do have this theory that I'm really good at like a very few things, and most of my time is dedicated to things I'm not very good at. You got
to flip that, then you'll be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible, but I would say the thing that I seem to be better at than most is helping to take a very complex situation on the deal side and see how the pieces all fit together. So as you can imagine, deal making is a very difficult skill set to get experience at, right? I mean, it's a sort of an infrequent activity. And over the years, I've seen 10,000 plus deals, negotiated a ton, seen a lot of the things, how deals fall apart, learned a lot about, when you introduce different elements and sort of how you get them to come together. And oftentimes there'll be moments in the deal, and the joke is you can't close a deal until you've lost it 3 times, at least 3 times. And I think that, oftentimes when that losing it is, there's something that's a mismatch between the buyer and the seller, and trying to figure out how to bridge those gaps in a way that creates larger pie for everyone, and not just splitting it, sort of zero-sum game. So I seem to be, it seems to come more naturally to me than anything else. But I mean, outside of that, like, honestly, I don't think I'm that talented. Like, I think that I'm a fairly mediocre, writer. I think that I'm, I sort of like, I can't do puzzles, and like, when I took the LSAT to get into law school, they thought it was a joke because I did really well in reading comprehension, logic, and reasoning, but I literally got like below what you'd have gotten if you just guessed on the logic games. Like, there's parts of my brain that are like missing. And when it comes to evaluating talent, leadership, I actually don't think that you said that I'm a good leader earlier in the podcast. Like, I would argue I'm not, and I would argue it's really difficult to find younger good leaders, just because good leadership takes so much time to really cultivate, and it's a lifelong pursuit of how do you support and help grow people in ways that they couldn't do on their own. I mean, that's the value of a true leader. I mean, when we think of leadership, it's not just directing people. It's not just telling people what to do and the way they should do it. It's empowering them to grow as human beings and grow in their capabilities and skill sets in a way that they couldn't do on their own. That's what a truly great leader does. It gives them opportunities. And I would say from that perspective, like most of the time I'm selfish and I want to think about myself and what I want, and I want to get things done, and I lack patience, and I get frustrated with things when I shouldn't. And so, I've got a lot of room to grow as a leader. And that's what is actually exciting to me and drives me, is that, I haven't even, I feel like, scratched the surface on what I'm capable of being. And I think that our organization is just on the very, very beginning of a long journey to hopefully create a group of people that can do some very special things and do it the right way. We're very, very focused on trying to do it the right way. Don't always do it the right way. But aspirationally want to just, there's far more to life than just making money.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a lot of self-awareness there. So I'm guessing we talked about that, just decentralized. I'm guessing your team of 12 at Permanent probably operates fairly decentralized, and everyone's doing their own thing, and you let them go and give them some leash. And I imagine.
Probably too much at times. But yes, I think that honestly, that's one of the things that we've seen people come into our system and fail is, they want some direction. I don't think people fully appreciate how much direction and how many sort of guardrails are in traditional organizations. And for us, we bring people on to fill a role that we think is important for us, and then we say, great, go do your thing. Like, let us know if you need help, right? But we're not, I don't wake up every day. And this is where honestly, it's a failure. I don't wake up thinking about how can I help today make other people's jobs, easier, better, how to grow them. These are things that I need to be doing and I need to be focused on. And honestly, I get sidetracked with, a lot of other things that are far less valuable. So.
Sure. I think it's good advice you mentioned earlier for people coming into a company, is recognizing the culture, the leadership style, the environments, so that you can connect and thrive in that one that matches with you. If you know you're a person that needs marching orders, then find that leader that gives you those marching orders. Otherwise, it's just tough to change. And when you think about these companies that are multi-generational, I'm sure changing culture is real, like moving a glacier.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And that's why we, for the most part, whenever we acquire, we like to keep the same culture. If it's more command and control, we will allow it to be more, it's always on a spectrum. It's not a binary outcome. It's not either decentralized or, command and control. There's different styles and in-betweens. We just try to figure out whatever that is that works and make sure that it fits, so like I said, sort of the basic rubric that we have for what's tolerable. And then as long as it fits within the box, we try to let them be them.
Yeah. Last one then is, I always like to know, who are the mentors or leaders that really shaped you along your journey? It could be, some family member, a loved one. It could be someone that you just read or someone you studied. Who are your kind of key leaders who have impacted you?
Yeah. This is going to maybe sound like an unusual one. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I would say, I didn't pattern my career after anybody. And honestly, because I dropped out of law and MBA and then started a business, I've never really, I've had jobs here and there, but I've never really worked for anybody in a career path.
Sure.
So I didn't have somebody who showed me the ropes in private equity and showed me how to do deals and showed me how to, make this thing work. It's been a lot of trial and error. So I didn't have that. Certainly, read a lot of the great investors and, try to read a lot of biographies and understand, why we're successful people successful at different areas of their lives and unsuccessful at others, and, try to not, piss on the barbed wire or piss on the electric fence if I didn't have to. Right. But I would say probably to answer your question, my wife's been probably the most impactful from a leadership position. she's a PhD scientist. She is typically more introverted. In fact, we were talking about this last night at dinner. When we first came into our relationship, she was very introverted and I was very extroverted. And I'm still extroverted, but I'm far less extroverted. And she's way less introverted than she used to be. And so we kind of moved towards the middle. But she's been a very, she's been a very moderating force in my life. She's been, deeply thoughtful about how, and loving and kind and how I need to change, and is constantly helping me to see the better version of me and to try to achieve that. And so anyway, I would say from a leadership position, she has definitely called me out when, I need to be called out, and it's not always been pleasant and fun. But that's the true loving thing over time, right? It's easy to, we always think about, being loving and kind and sort of the same bucket as just being friendly. And it's like, look, if you don't have conflict, if you see somebody who you care for that's doing something that's harmful to them or to the people around them, like the most loving thing you can do is call them out on their crap and do so in a, hey, I'm rooting for you type way. And my wife's just done a really great job of that. So, I mean, in terms of like success of the business and, everything, I mean, she doesn't, she's not actively working day to day, she's a lot of time spent with our kids, but I mean, I would say she has more impact on the business than she probably realizes and that I think of often. So.
I love that. Yeah. If you go back and look at, the P&L of Lemonly over our 9-year history, you can tell when I met Paige, my wife, she's never worked a day at Lemonly either, but you can tell and they make you better. So
yeah,
that's cool.
Been fantastic.
Well, when we close, tell me, what is, if someone's listening, they're curious about this space, they know someone who wants to sell a business, maybe they want to buy a business. What's the best way to connect with you? Is it start with a book, follow you on Twitter? How can we connect with you, Brent?
Well, I say don't follow me on Twitter. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter.
You have great gifts.
It's more, yeah. I don't know. It's more hate than love these days. So, but I would say, the easiest thing is go to the website, permanentequity.com. We've got a lot of, I think, good, thoughtful content on there to try to help people, whether you're a buyer or a seller, make sense of the messy marketplace. I mean, the book is certainly, if you're curious about the actual sale process, it's I think is helpful. People have told us it's helpful. It seems to be well received. And then, I mean, we're all fairly available. So if you've got something specific that I can be helpful on, I'd certainly try. The things that sort of get my attention that I try to respond to are things that are thoughtful and less grabby, but, regardless, feel free to reach out and, we're available. So.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for the time today, Brent. This was a great conversation and good to catch up with you.
Yeah. Good to see you, John. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. All right. Thank you so much to Brent Beshore for his time, for sitting down with us and chatting about leadership, about how private equity works, and just his perspective on the world right now. I really enjoyed that conversation. So that was episode 15. Remember, new episodes drop every Thursday, and you can find the Leadmore podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Take care.